Hello, NFLHC. MP Clem back at it again with another episode of Around the NFLHC. We just passed week 6. Pretty good week. Some interesting things happened, so we're not going to delay. We're going to get right into Thursday night. So Thursday night, the 0-5 Chicago Bears hosted the 2-3 Minnesota Vikings in their first divisional game of the year. And the Bears came out on top 37-14. The top player for the Bears was quarterback Mohamed Foster. He had a grade of 8.5. He was 19 of 26 for 237 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also had 45 rushing yards and a touchdown. The top player for Ja'Cory Kessler. Kessler had a grade of 8.32. He had 5 catches for 64 yards and 1 touchdown. Worst player for the Bears, cornerback Andrew Faulkner, who had a grade of 1.46. And for Minnesota, defensive tackle Jared Lee had a grade of 2.21. Neither player was able to make a stat sheet here. The Bears' offensive line had a rating of 7.98, and the Vikings an 8.25. Both teams allowed 2 sacks in this game. Chicago was 6 of 11 on third downs for 55% conversion rate versus Minnesota's 2 of 12. So that had to play a huge role. Chicago staying on the field, being more efficient with the ball, and the running game really came to play for the most part. So that'll help a team like Chicago who struggles on third downs. Giving them shorter third downs and fewer third down attempts is probably the best thing for Mohamed Foster right now. Other players of note for Chicago, wide receiver David Gaines had 7 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. Cornerback Jalen Harris had 2 tackles and a pick. And inside linebacker Akil Morris had 6 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a sack. And for Minnesota, quarterback Brian Vardell was 17 of 32 for 176 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Rookie outside linebacker Devin Goss had 5 tackles and a sack. And outside linebacker Paul Goodman had 3 tackles and a sack. There's not a lot to go over. Minnesota ran trick plays. I don't know if it was in an attempt to kind of diversify their offense. In Indy we did that week 2 against Denver when Shea was out, just trying to do something weird and funky. It just doesn't work. You either have the team built specifically for trick plays, or you just don't run it. So Minnesota kind of hurt themselves a little bit there. Lots of people think in the chat said that they're tanking. I don't think so. I think Minnesota was just trying something new, and it just failed spectacularly. I think they'll grow from it. They won't do it again, and I think they'll try and play football with their best players and with their best schemes possible. Chicago, you're not winless anymore. You're still in the running up there for the number 1 pick. I'm not even sure who you would take. I don't know what tackles are even available for the number 1 pick this year. But either way, you're not winless anymore. You're on the board in the win column, and that's always a good feeling. So we'll go ahead and move on to 1 p.m. So the first game was the 1-4 Jets hosting the 2-2 Broncos, and the Jets won 31-17. Top player for the Jets was wide receiver Adam Coles, who had a grade of 8.21. Great to see him doing well and recovered from that injury and being the type of player that the Jets hoped he could be. Coles had 8 catches for 96 yards and 1 touchdown. For Denver, it was rookie outside linebacker Evan Walsh with a grade of 6.24, who had 4 tackles and a pick. Worst player for the Jets is longtime starter offensive tackle Joel Snow, who had a grade of 4.05. And for Denver, the old name, defensive tackle Emmanuel Serrano, I believe out of Stanford, had a grade of 2.75. This is his 3rd or 4th or 5th time being the worst rated player for the Broncos. So at some point, the Broncos probably have to start looking at their defensive tackle position and saying, can we try something else here and see if something else works? Because Serrano has not been it at all. Great offensive line performance in this game. The Jets had a rating of 8.41. The Broncos had a rating of 8.65, and the Jets gave up the only sack in the game. New York was a little bit less efficient on third downs, going 3 for 12 for 25% compared to Denver's 5 of 14 for 36%, but it doesn't hurt them. Denver had 10 penalties for 96 yards compared to the Jets' 45 penalty yards, so it's a two-score game, so those penalty yards probably don't make up the whole difference, but it probably does take off one score for Denver, or maybe gives the Jets another score that they wouldn't have had if not for the penalty. Other players for the Jets: quarterback Eric Weigert, 30 of 51 for 338 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception. Looks like the Jets are going away from the running game. Just hasn't been working for them for the most part. I think Sam Chapman has had one good game, and that's basically it. Wide receiver Paul Howell had 6 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown. Cornerback Corey Quinn had 3 tackles, a pick, and a pass defended defensively. And then for Denver, quarterback Eric Jennings in his first full start, I think it's his first full game starting. Nope, sorry, second full game. He was 16 of 31 for 190 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Just not good. We don't know if he'll get better or not. We'll see. I think Denver, if Jennings doesn't get better, Denver's probably going to be last in the West. Yeah, I think they'll be last, even behind the Chargers. I think they'll finish behind them if Jennings continues to play like this. Running back J.B. Blacknall had 14 carries for 58 yards, a touchdown, and a fumble lost. So nothing on offense was really working for the Broncos. Defensively, linebacker Cameron Jonah had 6 tackles and a sack. So your linebackers had a pretty good game, but not many other people on your team did, if you're Denver. Jets, 2-4, you're still in the playoff race. You're a little behind, but it's still not without reason that you could make it in there and make a wild card. And like I said, I think a couple times now, if there's one franchise I trust to make that push and make the playoffs, it's the Jets. So season's not over for Denver. Season probably is over, unfortunately. I don't think you guys are going to be able to recover from the injury to Todd there. So we'll move on to the next game. The 0-5 Patriots, who have, I think, played every game with the final score being single digits. I mean, every single game has been close for them. They're an 0-5 hosting the 4-1 Packers, and they lose 20-17. Just heartbreaking if you're the Pats. Absolutely heartbreaking. Top player for the Pats was quarterback Reggie Watkins, who had a grade of 6.55. He was 18 of 30 for 211 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Top player for the Packers was again tight end Bernard Taylor, who having a pretty good season. Had a grade of 7.95. He had 6 catches for 67 yards and a touchdown. Worst player for the Packers, free safety Robert Pendleton. He had a grade of 3.05, and he had 4 tackles in the game. Again, same again for the Packers, free safety Donovan Falk, worst player, 1.89 grade, no stats for him. Another really good offensive line battle here. The Patriots had an 8.59 offensive line rating. Did give up 2 sacks. Packers had an 8.39 rating and gave up a sack. So offensive line was really, really good play in this game. Really nice to see 2 teams actually having good ratings going off against each other, and game ending in a 3-point victory for one of the teams. Third downs is probably where these teams separate a little bit. The Patriots were 3 of 14, and the Patriots were 5 of 15. So, I mean, it's not that many more conversions, but when it's a 3-point game, those 2 conversions could have come on one drive that led to a field goal or led to an extra touchdown that the Patriots just didn't get. So those do matter here in this game. Other players for the Patriots, wide receiver Geno Harris had 4 catches for 53 yards and a drop. James Carson on defense had 3 tackles and a pick. And Rich Moore had 5 tackles and half a sack. For Green Bay, quarterback Jason Johnson was 20 of 32 for 208 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Strong safety Julio Barnes, 5 tackles and a pick. And then defensive end Kaluna Groth, 3 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, and a sack. Other note I have for this game, New England was winning 17-13 after 3 quarters. They just could not find the end zone because could not put together a consistent, good enough drive in the fourth quarter to at least tie and send to overtime. And in the end, the Packers score with Jason Johnson and take this one by 3. And again, the Packers have the Lions hot in their heels. So Packers need every single victory they can get right now, even if it's a close one against a team like the Patriots, who maybe aren't on the same level as you. A win is a win at this point, and so the Packers have to be at least happy that they came out with a victory. Maybe not satisfied with the way they won, but happy they did win. We'll move on to another game, which was my favorite game of the week so far. The 1-2-1 New York Giants hosted the 2-3 Indianapolis Colts, and the Colts won 41-14. Top player for the Giants was outside linebacker Lewis Peterson with a grade of 8.67. He had 6 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a sack. Top player for the Colts was quarterback Aaron Shea, who had a grade of 9.68. He was 35 of 54 for 330 yards and 4 touchdowns. Worst player for the Giants, offensive guard Marcus Slade with a grade of 3.02, and for the Colts, strong safety Jonathan Norman with a grade of 4.5. Another good offensive line game. Seems like we're having a lot of those in the 1 p.m. slot. Great to see the guys in the trenches doing well, at least on the offensive side. Giants had a rating of 8.23 and gave up 1 sack. The Colts had an 8.39 rating and gave up 2 sacks. Third downs were a huge difference here. New York was 3 of 14 for a 21% conversion rate. The Colts were 5 of 9 for a 55% conversion rate. 5 fewer third downs means that, to me at least, that the Colts were doing much better in first and second down, even with how often we threw the ball, that we weren't putting ourselves in bad position on third downs to kind of give the ball away, which is something we've struggled so far this season. So going 5 for 9 is great for us, and for Giants 3 for 14, it's just a struggle. Will Thompson didn't play well. Your running game wasn't very good, so offensively it was just a struggle today. While we're here, we'll talk about the other players to mention for this game, starting with the Giants. Quarterback Will Thompson was 14 of 27 for 155 yards, a touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Defensive tackle Brad Mungro had 4 tackles and a sack. And inside linebacker Freddie Suarez, 4 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. Now, other players for the Colts. Wide receiver Keith Stetzer, 10 catches, 121 yards, a touchdown, and a drop. Strong safety Chris Brown, playing the nickelback for us, had 3 tackles and a pick. And defensive end Jonathan Goodwin had 3 tackles and a sack. Giants, I mentioned this before, any wins you get this season are just nice. You're not going to compete. You just don't have the talent to compete, especially on offense. So any wins you get are nice. And, you had a better record than the Jets for a few weeks, and that's always a good storyline for you, but that seems to be going away now, unfortunately. The Colts, we were, I think, 2 games back now in the division of everybody else, so getting a win is huge for us, so that'll help get us, at least stay within 2 games, and keeps us in the wild card there. So we'll move on to the next game. The 4-1 Texans hosting the 3-2 Washington football team, and the Washington football team won 31-27. Top player for the Texans, tight end Kendall Brandon, had a grade of 7.66. He had 6 catches for 89 yards and a touchdown. And, top player for Washington, running back Ricardo Reed, having a very weird season. He had a grade of 7.85, 15 carries, 108 yards, and a touchdown. The worst player for the Texans was cornerback Brent Johnson, had a grade of 4.02. And for Washington, cornerback Miles Gray, grade of 4.26. Neither guy made a stat sheet. The Texans offensive line had a rating of 8.32 and gave up 2 sacks, while the Washington football team had a rating of 8.5 and gave up no sacks. The losing team actually won the third down battle this time. Houston was 5 of 14 compared to Washington's 3 of 12. All that means is that Houston was present at 2 more opportunities and converted them. So it's not inherently better. It's a higher conversion rate, of course. But Washington having 2 fewer attempts is a slight win for them. Penalties, heavy penalty game. The Texans had 11 for 104 yards and Washington 9 for 76. That's 180 penalties yards there, so that's nice. Other players for Houston to talk about. Quarterback Alex LaShore, 27 of 40 for 340 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Great game outside the 2 picks. If he avoids those 2 interceptions, I think Houston wins this game by 10 points probably. Those 2 picks just killed him. Wide receiver Marvin White, 5 catches, 84 yards, a touchdown, and a drop. And quarterback Tom Wyman, 1 tackle and 1 interception. And for Washington, quarterback Tanner Bowman was 20 of 30 for 281 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Just like LaShore, great game minus the interceptions. I can't imagine what the score would have been if these 2 teams avoided picks. Probably would have been closer to 27-24, maybe 24-21. But either way, good on Washington getting the win, even with the turnovers. Tight end Tony DeMarco, 6 catches, 104 yards, and a touchdown. And then rookie cornerback Tre'Davious Dykes, 2 tackles and a pick. I think he's got like 3 picks in 4 games now, so really good on him. Really good. I think he's playing the nickel for them right now, so he's doing a really good job, at least creating turnovers. Other notes I have: Houston was up 27-24 after the third quarter, and just like New England, just could not muster a fourth quarter drive to get some points on the board, and that was all Washington needed to score a touchdown, and that's the only score we saw in the fourth quarter, and that was ended up determining the game. We'll move on to the next one. The 3-1 Titans hosting the 2-2 Eagles, and Tennessee holds on to win 34-31. And what's probably, at least today, I'm recording this before Monday Night Football, or Sunday Night Football, has been posted, the most entertaining game. Top player for Tennessee, tight end Haston Ryder, grade of 8.95. He had 10 catches for 125 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a drop. And the top player for Philly, defensive end Ryan Frey, with a grade of 8.42. He had 4 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. Worst player for the Titans was cornerback Michael Hernandez with a grade of 2.85, and for Philly, guard Robert Fontenot with a grade of 3.26. Tennessee's offensive line had a rating of 8.29, gave up 3 sacks, and for Philly, 8.27 and gave up 2 sacks. Both these teams were pretty good on fourth downs. Tennessee was 4 of 10. Philly was 5 of 12, so it's not really much of a difference in this game. And just like the last game, a lot of penalties. Tennessee had 9 for 84 yards, and Philly 12 for 105. Other players of note for Tennessee, quarterback Thomas Wheeler was 30 of 50 for 340 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. Defensively, cornerback Jordan Harris had a tackle and an interception. And rookie inside linebacker Tyrese Thompson, who's had a pretty quiet season, had 7 tackles and 2 tackles for a loss, so good game for him. Other players of note for Philly, quarterback Alan Taylor, 23 of 38 for 238 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. He also had 77 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. The pick doesn't help, but he was just a little inefficient for what this offense. Tennessee can kind of weather Thomas Wheeler maybe not completing 65% of his passes, and they can get over that. I don't know that Philly's offense right now can get over Alan Taylor playing like that. He's got to be closer to 66%, I think, completion-wise, for Philly to really, maximize their potential, just because the running game just isn't quite there right now. Speaking of, running back Troy White had 18 carries for 78 yards and a touchdown, so that's right around 4 yards a carry. Strong safety Joe Johnson had 3 tackles and an interception. And Philly's offense right now, it's just, they scored 31, so it's hard to say that they're not doing good, but they're not doing good right now. Not very well. It's the running game just isn't nearly as efficient as it was last year. I know that they had an offensive line player retire and replaced him, so That's like the only real difference they had. I think everyone else progressed ratings wise, so it's hard to really pinpoint what exactly has gone wrong for the offense. You know, they're still 2-3, still in the heart of the NFC playoff. They can still win their division, so not a lot to negative to say. It's just the running game isn't quite there for Tennessee. Please stop winning. Just stop winning. Move on to our next game. Cincinnati at 3-2 defeated the 1-4 49ers 24-6. I paused a little bit at the beginning because I wrote Cleveland instead of Cincinnati, and then I remembered, oh wait, Cleveland lost, so this has to be Cincinnati. So I'm sorry, Cleveland. I got confused because this was your team winning, but I knew you lost, so sorry about that. Top player for the Bengals. Strong safety R.C. Roan had a grade of 8.5. He had 3 tackles and 2 passes defended. And top player for the 49ers, inside linebacker Dalroy Smart, grade of 7.57, 6 tackles and 8 interception. Worst player for Cincy, guard Melvin Lee, grade of 2.0. And for Prince McGill is the worst player for San Francisco, the free safety. He had a grade of 3.45, 3 tackles, and a pass defended. Offensive line rating for Cincinnati, 8.29, and for San Francisco, 8.19. Both teams allowed 2 sacks. Third down woes continue for San Francisco. They were 2 of 12 for 17%. Cincinnati wasn't much better, but they were 4 of 12, which is about double the percentage conversion rate. So that's enough to help a team win by 18 points there. For Cincinnati, quarterback Joel Keane, who's had an absolute fire season, had a kind of a subpar game. He was 21 of 40 for 226 yards, a touchdown, and interception. Wide receiver Jameer Blackburn had 6 catches for 95 yards, a touchdown, and a drop. And cornerback Blake Turner, 2 tackles, 1 interception, and 1 pass defended. Other players of note for San Francisco, quarterback Orly Vaquero, 16 of 32 for 190 yards, 2 interceptions. He also had 31 rushing yards. I didn't even mention the rest of the San Francisco offense. That's how bad it was. And defensive end, Parker Holmes, the rookie, 3 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a sack. He's had a pretty good season so far. So if you're San Francisco, it's at least one thing to hang your hat on so far is that you picked the right guy there. And the defensive tackle, Michael McBride, 2 tackles and a sack. For San Francisco, we knew that the loss of Todd Lester would hurt you. We saw what your team looked like under Philip Ray, and it was bad, miserable. And then Vaquero comes back for a game, looks great, you win. But I don't know that Vaquero is really a long-term answer at quarterback. He's more of a in-game kind of relief force. I don't know that if you really want him to be a guy to start multiple games, but you don't really know how much of a choice for San Francisco. I think I should just let the season ride out, and whatever happens, happens. I mean, Todd Lester comes back week 11, and you win your last 5-6 games, you can still win this division. That's how awful, truly awful this division has been. So the season's not over for San Francisco. They can still host a playoff game at 6-10 or 7-9. Jesus. For Cincinnati, you're at 4-2 now. You're right there. I think right there, leading the wild card or right outside the wild card. So just keep winning, and you'll do some good things. I've been really, really impressed with Cincinnati's season. I projected them to go 0-16, so I've been way, way wrong on the Bengals. So I like to be proven wrong when a team does better than they're supposed to, in my mind. So that's more fun for me doing this than if a team were to be massively disappointing. Move on to our next game. Not that it was massively disappointing. It's just a bad segue, unfortunately, for me. The 0-5 Cardinals hosting the 3-1-1 Falcons, and the Cardinals win 21-17. I'd be remiss to not mention that Achille Wallace had 8 carries and then hurt himself and is out for a little bit of time. And Early Davis also received an injury who then probably missed the rest of the game. So Atlanta was not at full strength for the whole game. That, to me, explains part of the reason why they didn't end up winning. Either way, good job for Arizona to get their first win. I think now you are tied for the division lead at 1-5. Nope, I think you're second place because we'll talk about 4 p.m. games about what happened with Seattle. But you're 1-5. Top player for the Cardinals, running back Trevon Yeldon with a grade of 7.66, 21 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown. And top player for Atlanta, still doing it, outside linebacker Tommy Leonard, grade of 7.21. He had 5 tackles and a sack. Worst player for Arizona, who's had just awful luck at wide receiver this year, just been terrible. Wide receiver Art Baber, grade of 2.25. He had 2 catches for 20 yards and a drop. I think Arizona has cut 2 or 3 receivers and tried other people, and it just really hasn't worked much out well for them in either way. So it's just, I guess, a season where Arizona's just going to have terrible wide receiver play. I don't know. Worst player for the Falcons, inside linebacker Marcus Grant had a grade of 3.21. He had 4 tackles in the game. The Cardinals' offensive line had a rating of 8.21 and gave up 2 sacks, and the Falcons had a rating of 8.3 and gave up 1 sack. Arizona converted 4 of 15 of their third downs, and Atlanta 4 of 13. Those 2 extra attempts for Arizona didn't end up really mattering, because once Keeley went out, Atlanta's offense just kind of slowed down. It's hard to see Atlanta losing this game if Achilles in the whole game. He only got 8 carries, but he did get 46 yards in those carries. So he was super efficient with those few touches he had. Just wasn't able to maximize, himself because of the injury, unfortunately. So other players for Arizona. Quarterback Paul Davenport was 20 of 27 for 240 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He also had 6 carries and 52 rushing yards. Now, if Paul Davenport can stop turning the ball over as much as he is, I think this Arizona offense has potential to be semi-competent, to be good enough to win some games in the division and compete for the division title. I don't know that this front offense wants to necessarily, with this team, go to the playoffs, but at some point, this Arizona fan base needs something. They need something to be happy about. So I think if Paul Davenport can cut the turnovers and be as efficient as he was today, 20 of 27 is fantastic. This Arizona offense has potential to score some points and stay with some people and not be hapless as they have been in a couple of games this year. Wide receiver Adrian Allen, who they just traded for, had 4 catches for 85 yards and a touchdown. And cornerback Aaron Samuelson, who they got in free agency, 3 tackles and a pick. Other players for Atlanta, quarterback A.J. Jefferson, 17 of 31 for 199 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And as I mentioned, Akili Wallace, the running back, had 8 carries for 46 yards before getting hurt. Free safety Darius Jones, 3 tackles, a pick, and a pass defended. Arizona again, 1-5. I think a little spoilies, but Seattle leads the division at 1-4 after the 4 p.m. slot games. It's, again, if the offense can stop turning the ball over, you have some real opportunities this year to surprise some teams and at least keep a couple teams out of the playoffs maybe late in the year and upset a couple teams. For Atlanta, your offense obviously goes through Akili, and losing him for any amount of time is not good. I don't know how long he's out for, but it's hard to see this team being all that competitive with him out. But at 3-2-1, you're still in it. So if it's just a couple of weeks without Akili, try a couple new things. Try a new secondary scheme and see what happens. Just try something new. I think it's a good opportunity for you to look at other schemes and just kind of see what AJJ might fit in as a secondary. And then when Akili comes back, come back to what you normally run and just give him the ball like normal. Either way, tough loss for Atlanta. Great win for Arizona. It's good to see teams, stop horrible losing streaks at the beginning of the year. We are moving on to 4 p.m. First game of the slot is the 0-4 Seattle Seahawks hosting the 3-2 Cleveland Browns. Seattle ended up winning 31-20. The top player for the Seahawks was quarterback Jarius Jones with a grade of 9.43. He was 25 of 33 for 342 yards, 4 touchdowns, and a pick. The top player for the Browns was wide receiver Ray Lee Marconi with a grade of 6.96. My boy RLM still has it, still doing it. He had 5 catches for 63 yards. Worst rated player for the Seahawks was cornerback Eric Hauser with a grade of 4.26. And for Cleveland, free safety Martin Hernandez with a grade of 3.53. Neither player ended up making a stat sheet. The Seahawks had an 8.21 offensive line rating and gave up just 1 sack. The Browns had an offensive line rating of 7.96 and gave up 6 sacks. 6 in one game. 6. That's over a sack a quarter. That's not good, guys. Not good. Third down wise, Seattle was 5 for 12 compared to Cleveland's 3 for 12, so Seattle was a little bit more efficient there. Other players of note for the Seahawks, running back Marcus Williams had 19 carries for 104 yards, a good game out of him. Wide receiver Josiah McCray had 8 catches for 150 yards and a touchdown. And on defense, outside linebacker Kenji Sagatomo had a great game with 4 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, 1.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and a fumble recovered. And for Cleveland, quarterback Ryan Clark was 16 of 26 for 164 yards and a touchdown. He also had 38 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. Running back Sean Bell had 11 carries for just 42 yards and a fumble lost. So a guy that had been playing really, really well in the early part of the season just played very poorly this week and just didn't have it. Cornerback Cameron Marshall for the defense had 3 tackles and a pick. So at least someone on the defense was trying to make an impact. Unfortunately, Marshall was just 1 of 11, and the other 10 guys didn't really show up, unfortunately, for the Browns. Cleveland started out red hot, winning the first 3 games. So they beat the Raiders even, they beat the Rams, and then they lost at Pittsburgh. It was a close game. They put 3-1. Then I forgot who they lost to last week, but this week is definitely this loss is probably the worst one for sure. I know it's on the road, and Seattle does have some solid players, but overall Seattle's kind of a weak team, and to give them their first win, is be the first team to lose to a win this team, this far into the season. It's never a good feeling. So Cleveland got it, 3-3. They're still in it. You can still maybe not win your division, but Pittsburgh is already 3 games up on you, or 2.5 games up at least. Yeah, 3 games up. Sorry. So I would say focus for the wild card. Focus on beating Baltimore right now, and I think you can still make it. For Seattle, 1-4 gives you the division lead, like I mentioned in the 1 p.m. games. Seattle leads NFC West at 1-4. They have a whole game and a half on the Rams. Great win. I know that front office doesn't want to lose. No one wants to lose, so great win for the Seahawks, and as they try to win their division and hopefully try and get to 500 at least. As an outsider, it'd be great to have a division winner being 3-13. That would be great. I don't see it happening. There's just too many. It's not. You have to win the games in division for that to happen. So 4-12, 5-11 division winner would be incredible as an outsider to that division. So good game for Seattle. Okay, we'll move on to the next game. The undefeated 5-0 Pittsburgh Steelers, who have the best record in the league, hosting the 3-1 Baltimore Ravens, their in-divisional rival. And Pittsburgh came away with a 22-16 victory. The top player for the Steelers was the defensive end Carlos Washington, with a grade of 8.85. Buckle in. This stat line is going to take a while to read out. 4 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, 2 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. Carlos Washington's having maybe the best defensive performance on the season so far. He's been the Steelers' best player, I think, 3 of the 3 or 4 of the 6 games. So he's been electric and outstanding. And really, there's no one really comparing to him, maybe outside of Tyrone Jones for the Ravens. Speaking of the Ravens, their top-rated player was cornerback Troy Marshall, who had a grade of 7.85. He had 3 tackles and a pick. Worst player for Pittsburgh was wide receiver Samuel Jolly with a grade of 4.53. He had 4 catches for 45 yards and a drop. Worst player for the Ravens, inside linebacker Peyton Roaches with a grade of 3.6 and no stats for him. The Steelers' offensive line had a rating of 8.19 and the Ravens a rating of 8.08. Both teams gave up 5 sacks. That's kind of the Ravens' MO this year, is their defense is getting constant and unending pressure on the quarterback, while their own offensive line is just giving up constant and unending pressure on Brett Fisher. I think I saw Dactor in his shoutbox yesterday talking about, I think the Ravens were on pace for 67 sacks for the defense, but we're on pace to give up like 50 on offense. It's just been a real weird year for their offense. Their offensive line has really not played well, and it's really hurt the rest of their team, especially obviously when they're on offense. The defense has been fantastic and outstanding. There's nothing negative at all to say about the defense. Let's see here. Other players of note for the Steelers: quarterback Norris Brookshire, 21 of 42 for 226 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. That's just the Ravens factor. Brookshire has been not hyper efficient, but he's avoided turnovers like crazy very well. He really hasn't turned the ball over at all this season, really. But the Ravens defense has ways of making you do things you don't normally do. Defensive tackle Quentin Smith, my boy, 5 tackles, half a sack, and a forced fumble. Always love seeing him make an impact for the Steelers there. And inside linebacker Ron Mobley had 6 tackles and a sack. Now for the Ravens, quarterback Brett Fisher was 14 of 23 for 136 yards, a fumble lost, and then he had 7 carries for 31 yards. He's just not getting it done right now. Last year he had some injury issues. He had poor receiving core. But this year, receiving core is better. He's healthy. But now his offensive line has issues all over the place. And that really has hurt him a lot. And I don't know how much longer the Ravens can really give him past this season. And I think the Ravens' defense is on a very limited timeline. So if they want to maximize their defense's impact in the game, I think looking to someone else besides Brett Fisher next year has to be, an option that they explore. Running back Musa Good, 15 carries for 51 yards and 1 fumble. He was very Musa bad. And the defensively, outside linebacker Tyrone Jones had 6 tackles and 1.5 sacks. I think he's on pace to shatter the sack record in the season for an outside linebacker. He has been phenomenal, just like Carlos Washington. And the guy we'll talk about in the next game, Preston Bryant. Those 3 guys have probably been the best 3 individual pass rushers on the season. Only other game note I have is game went to overtime, and of course Pittsburgh won. So good win for Pittsburgh. They've had a couple of close wins now, but they just keep winning. And they've beaten 2 division opponents, or maybe 3. So they've done a good job against the division, and I think now have at least a 2-game lead over anybody else right now. I think the next closest team is the Bengals at 4-2. So they have a 2-game lead after 6 weeks. So if you're Steelers, you're very happy with that. And for the Ravens, you just gotta find some offense. 20 points. If you score 20 points with this defense, that should win you most games. You just have to find a way to get there. We'll move to the next game. The 1-4 Los Angeles Chargers hosting the 4-1 Jacksonville Jaguars, and Jacksonville wins 38-24. Top-rated player for the Chargers was tight end Scott Howard, who has had a phenomenal year. He had 5 catches for 75 yards, a touchdown, and a grade of 7.05. Top player for the Jags, running back Asante Sowell, a grade of 8.95. He had 16 carries for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. Worst player for the Chargers, running back Brandon Austin, after an encouraging, maybe not particularly good, but had some signs of encouragement rookie season. Brandon Austin has really, really, really been bad this year. He had a grade of 3.45. He had 9 carries for 22 whole yards. That's Colts level bad. The worst player for the Jags was defensive tackle Ronald Barker, playing for the injured Shamar Ware. Grade of 4.02 and no stats for him. Fortunately for the Jags, I believe Shamar Ware is eligible to come back next week. I don't know that they will necessarily play him week 1. He's questionable. They may give him another week off. But by that point, they should still be right there in the lead for the division. So I think it's a smart move to sit Ware for just another week. Just let him heal up. The Chargers' offensive line had a rating of 8.04 and gave up 4 sacks. Matty Swift was getting beat the hell out there. The Jags had an offensive line rating of 8.3 and gave up 2 sacks. Third down wise, Chargers were 5 of 13 compared to the Jags 6 of 11. So the Chargers were just in a couple more attempts. Maybe just weren't playing as well. His offense is really, really pass oriented with no reliable running back. So I've got to imagine they're going to be facing a lot of 3rd and 8s and 3rd and 9s compared to most teams in the league. Speaking of quarterbacks, Matty Swift for the Chargers was 24 of 39 for 260 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Now, if he could clean up the turnovers, Matty Swift could do some nice things this year. Just unfortunately, he just can't avoid it. His receiving core is not great. As we've highlighted, his offensive line in front of him is not good either. So have the best supporting cast, I should say. So he struggled with that. Cornerback Austin Shepard, I believe he's a second-year player out of Penn State, had 2 tackles and a pick. And outside linebacker Shane Easley had 5 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a sack. Other players for Jacksonville, quarterback Taylor Rodriguez, 29 of 45 for 349 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. He's had a pretty good season. He's throwing up the ball a lot. And I like to see maybe Sewell see some more carries, but it's 5-1. I can't argue with what the Jags are doing in offense because it's working. Wide receiver Raheem Robinson had 10 catches for 105 yards. And defensive end Preston Bryant having a monster season right now, 3 tackles and 3 sacks in one game. So he individually lived in Matty Swift's backfield, not letting the quarterback really get much of anything going. Other game note, if there's a silver lining to this game for the Chargers, the game was 21-21 after 3 quarters. In the 4th quarter, that's where teams like Jacksonville separate themselves from teams like the Chargers. And they just did outscore them 17-3. But at least the Chargers kept the game close for 3 quarters. That's an improvement over what they've done in the past couple of seasons. So it's not a ton of progress for the Chargers, but I'm seeing it, and I think the front office is starting to see it too. Move on to our next game. 2-3 Kansas City Chiefs hosting the 4-0 Saints, and the 4-0 Saints are now the 4-1 Saints as they lose 23-21. Top player for the Chiefs, running back Terrence Rogers with a grade of 8.57. He had 16 carries for 100 yards and a touchdown, and then 2 catches for 33 yards. Maybe he had 2 touchdowns. I'm not seeing a 3rd touchdown on the stat sheet, so I think Terrence Rogers might have had 2. I wrote down wrong. Top player for the Saints, running back Sterling Brown, grade of 7.66, 12 carries for 87 yards. That's over 7 yards a carry for Sterling Brown. I think the Saints will take that every time. Worst player for the Chiefs, wide receiver Hines Mertens, grade of 1.46. I believe that ties him with Andrew Faulkner for the worst grade on the season. Hines had 1 catch for 14 yards and 2 hole drops. Worst player for the Saints was inside linebacker Willard Arnold with a grade of 3.72. The Chiefs' offensive line had a rating of 8.35 and they gave up just 1 sack, while the Saints had a rating of 8.32 and gave up 3 sacks. Teams were pretty even on 3rd downs. Chiefs were 4 of 12, Saints 3 of 13, but maybe that extra conversion for the Chiefs led to a field goal that the Saints didn't get because they didn't convert at midfield and had to punt the ball away. So that extra conversion could come to be important in this game. Quarterback Ryan Harris for the Chiefs, 15 of 27 for 150 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Not, his best game by any stretch of the imagination. But when you have a running back as good as Terrence Rodgers, I think it gives, the Chiefs and a guy like Ryan Harris some breathing room to make mistakes and still have a chance to win. Quarterback, Marquez Warner, I believe, recently of the Jets. 2 tackles, 2 picks, and a pass defended. Good game for him. And defensive tackle, Bud Howard, playing in relief of the loss to free agency Malik Dawson. 4 tackles, tackle for a loss, and a sack. Other players for the Saints, quarterback Aaron Devereaux, his first real kind of bad game of the season, was 22 of 41 for 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Cornerback Devin Little had 2 tackles and a pick. And outside linebacker Austin Olsen had 5 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a sack. Given all the injuries that this Saints secondary has experienced over the last 2 or 3 weeks, for them to hold Ryan Harris to 15-27 and pick him off twice, I think it's actually a really impressive game for this Saints secondary. And I know the Chiefs don't have, a real reliable number 1 receiver. This Saints secondary is down, I think, 2 or 3 starters at least right now. So to be able to come in and limit a rookie, but a guy who can sling the damn ball to 150 yards and 2 picks, I think it's a really good game for an injury-riddled secondary. I think that the Saints should at least be proud of that part. I do have one note. It looks like that the Saints accidentally ran trick plays, and talking with Imposter Coster, there was confusion over how the secondary scheme was interpreted and how it was going to be used. I can't fully explain. I don't think the Saints can fully explain the thought process behind it, but they didn't intend to run trick plays to do this. But they went for it in 4th down, a fake punt. Adonis Rosa, threw a pick. I'm guessing this is when Daniel Hobbs got his pick. I can't see it. The only other situation I could see him being on the field to get a pick is a Hail Mary, but we don't have visibility. So I'm going to assume he was on the punt return team and defended the punt return and picked off the punter there for the Saints. Saints 4-1, still lead the division. Panthers are coming on hot right now, but you still lead the division, so I wouldn't be too worried about this game. A weird kind of secondary issues and scheme issues, I think you'll be fine. Chiefs, you need everyone you can get. The Raiders are playing really, really well right now. So I think everyone you can get to try and keep pace with them and stay with the wild card is good for you. Move on to our last game of the 4 p.m. slot. The 0-5 Los Angeles Rams, that's right, you heard me, the 0-5 Los Angeles Rams hosted the 2-3 Tampa Bay Bucks, and the Bucks won 35-30. Top player for the Rams was quarterback Daryl Murphy, guy who I've shouted out in the past couple of weeks for just not really being himself. Murphy was 16 of 30 for 229 yards, 2 touchdowns with a grade of 7.6, so no turnovers, but just not really efficient. Best player for the Bucks, quarterback Taylor Hayden, grade of 8.64. He was 21 of 31 for 309 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. He did have 29 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. He's got 4 rushing touchdowns now. He's not going to get a ton of yards. It's not his game to scramble and get a ton of yards, but he escapes well, and he's a scoring threat in the red zone with his legs. So I think that's something that the Bucks have done very well this season in utilizing that strength of his. Worst player for the Rams, free safety Samuel Prince, grade of 2.58. And for the Bucks, wide receiver Cotton Lewis, grade of 1.63. Neither guy made a stat sheet, so we had a wide receiver get the lowest score for his team and not even make a damn stat sheet. That hasn't happened yet. He's the first one to do that on the season. So just Cotton Lewis things, I guess. Let's see, offensive lines. Rams, they're really missing Nigel Smith right now. They had an offensive line rating of 7.87, gave up 2 sacks, while the Bucks had an 8.19 rating and did not give up a single sack. So great game for the Bucks offensive line there. On 3rd down, the Rams are 5 of 13 compared to the Bucks 5 of 10. The Rams are just a much better rushing team, so they're probably going to face more favorable 3rd downs or more favorable 2nd downs. And in a one-score game, 5 points, if you're forced to give the ball away one or two extra times than your opponent because you're in 3rd and 9 and you can't convert, while they're facing 3rd and 3 and converting, or facing 2nd and 3 and getting the first down on that second down play, that can make a big difference in the final outcome. Other players for the Rams, running back David Knox was 19 carries for 85 yards, 2 touchdowns. His first real not shit game, so really nice to see that from him. A guy that I was kind of high on coming into the draft process. And I thought the Rams were kind of a perfect match for him and what they wanted to do offensively. Wide receiver Alama Banta. I haven't thought of that name in a long time. 4 catches, 91 yards, a touchdown. And outside linebacker Lee Davey had 4 tackles and a pick. Even a guy like Brandon Souter for this defense isn't doing the things he normally does. He's normally a turnover machine. He's usually a tackle machine. He's just kind of quiet this year. So this Rams defense, they haven't really faced many injuries from what I can tell, and I don't remember them losing too many pieces in the offseason. It's just not working out for them this year for whatever reason. Other players for the Bucks, running back Denoris Jackson had 18 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. Outside linebacker Thomas Berry had 6 tackles, a sack, and a pass defended. And inside linebacker Andre Brooks had 7 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. I think Brooks is leading the league, or right there with the league lead in tackles, so that's been a nice little pickup for the Bucks defense there. Only game note I have is Tampa Bay was up 17-3 at halftime, so the Rams scored 27 points in the second half. So, I mean, the offense came alive today. You can't blame the offense in this game. Even if Daryl Murphy was not as efficient as normal, the defense really, really failed them. The offense didn't have any turnovers. They didn't put the defense in any really bad positions at least. So it's the defense just didn't play well. And for the Rams, 0-6, you're last in your division. That's a tough spot to be in, but the leader of your division has 1 win, so you're definitely not out of it yet. For the Bucks, with the Panthers winning, with the Saints losing, and the Falcons losing, that kind of gives you a good win here against a good opponent on the road. Build some momentum, and go on to the next few games and try and get to maybe 7-4 at that point. In the next 5 games, you go 4-1. I think it'll put you in great position for the playoffs. Move on to Sunday Night Football. The 3-2 Cowboys hosted the 3-2 Panthers, and the Panthers won 27-24. Top player for the Cowboys was cornerback Travis Chapman, grade of 9.51. He had an interception, a pass defended, and that might not immediately stand out to you as, well, why is that the top player? That's not really that impactful. Until you look at Monte Jackson's stat line. He had 2 catches for 25 yards. He was just completely shut out of the game by Chapman. Fantastic game by him. And for the Panthers, wide receiver Jermaine Bishop. Unfortunately, Chapman can't do it all on his own. Bishop had a grade of 8.05. He had 7 catches for 108 yards and a touchdown. Worst player for the Cowboys, like I mentioned, Chapman can't do it on his own. Cornerback Jeremy Evans, grade of 3.86. Worst player for the Panthers, inside linebacker Kevin Grossman, grade of 3.5. The Cowboys offensive line rating of 8.36 compared to the Panthers 8.26. Both teams allowed 2 sacks. Third down wise, neither team was really good. Dallas was 4 of 15 and Carolina was 4 of 12. In a 3-score game, 3 more third down attempts probably means more punts, probably means turnover and downs, or scoring a field goal where Carolina would have scored a touchdown. It is stuff like that couldn't happen in a game like that with 1-score game like this. So that is impactful. I think I've said that 5 times now. Let's see. Other players for the Cowboys. Quarterback Graham Burnett was 20 of 33 for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. So not bad, not great, but that should definitely give his team a chance to win, and it did. Running back Adrian Robinson, probably a little bit more important right now to the Cowboys' success, is him at least being able to get 4.5 yards a carry, which he did today. 21 carries for 98 yards and touchdown. Defensive end Javier Grady had 4 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and 1.5 sacks. Other players for the Panthers. Quarterback Christian Skaggs, just doing Skaggs things. 25 of 35 for 330 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Cornerback Jacoby Severns had 2 tackles and a pick. It's like the second time in 3 games, or the third time in 4 games that he's had a pick. So Severns, is kind of a meme for being a bad cornerback, but he's coming up, he's making an impact, he's getting turnovers, and that's important for this Panthers defense as they're not really all that great at stopping teams right now. So if they can at least cause turnovers and give the ball back to Skaggs and Latta, I think that's a winning formula there. Defensive end Kendrick Drones had 3 tackles and a sack. Skaggs orchestrated a really nice comeback. The Panthers were down 24-13 after 3 quarters, and then outscored the Cowboys 14-0 in that 4th quarter. So great job there. I know that's just sometimes you're Dallas and you have a young quarterback and you go off against a guy like Christian Skaggs. That's just gonna happen from time to time. Skaggs is a veteran. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to play in those kind of critical moments. And my cat is tearing at the goddamn carpet for no reason. And Skaggs is one of the guys I trust the most to make that kind of comeback. He's just an absolute baller, gunslinger. He's going to sling the ball over their mountains. He's basically our Uncle Rico if Uncle Rico was successful. That's how I view him. So Dallas 3-3 now. Your division leader I think is also 3-3. So you're right there with them. And the Panthers, Falcons lost and Saints lost, so you're right there with them at 4-2. Saints are 4-1, so you're half a game back. So you're right there in the division. After a real slow start, you've really put it on and playing really, really well.
It is now time to talk about our game of the week. Our game of the week for week 6 is a Monday night matchup, so it's actually in the same spot Monday Night Football would have been placed anyways, but the 4-1 Las Vegas Raiders hosted the 4-0 Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins blasted the Raiders 35-10. It was really a complete dominant effort. The Dolphins were up 21-3 at halftime, so they even still outscored the Raiders in the second half, 14-7. So there was just no real positives to take away from this if you're Vegas. Usually I talk about the top and worst players, but I can't really for both teams, at least for the top players. There's no top or worst listed for the Raiders at this point in time, and no top player listed for the Dolphins. But we do have a worst player for the Dolphins, wide receiver Sam Baugh, the freshman out of, I believe, Air Force, had a grade of 1.85, but did not make a stat sheet. So you've got to wonder what he did to justify that low of a rating. So move on now to the offensive line ratings. The Raiders had an 8.19 rating, and the Dolphins had an 8.21. The Dolphins sacked Hall twice, and the Raiders sacked Brown once. We start seeing a little bit more separation here in third downs. The Raiders were 3 of 13 for a conversion rate of 23%, while the Dolphins were 5 of 11 for a conversion rate of 45%. So the name of the game for the Dolphins today, especially in offense, was just efficiency. Marcus Berry had 5 yards to carry. Caleb Sherwin had 6 yards to carry. Brandon Brown had almost 9 yards or over 9 yards per attempt. The offense was just good. And so when your offense is just good like that, you're going to do well in third downs. You're going to be at manageable third downs. Meanwhile, the Raiders' offense was just anemic. They got, I think, a total of 47 rushing yards on 14 attempts. So the running game was virtually non-existent for them. So it was all Nick Hall, and Nick Hall really didn't respond well. It was one of the very few times you'll see Nick Hall not respond well to a game. Another way we can separate these teams is penalty yardage. The Raiders had 58 on 5 penalties, while the Dolphins had just 25, also on 5 penalties. So that's probably telling you that the Raiders are either committing pass interference or they're committing personal fouls, while the Dolphins are false start or offsides. That's two totally different types of penalties but the same amount of penalty amount gives you a drastically different yardage. And for a team like the Raiders that were already struggling to either slow down the Dolphins' offense or get their offense going, having this many penalties or penalty yardage, I should say, probably doesn't help you at all. So other players we will need to talk about for the Raiders. Quarterback Nick Hall, I mentioned that he didn't have a good game. Well, here's his stat line. He was 13 of 26 for 122 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. That's quite possibly the worst Nick Hall game we've ever seen. I really don't know what happened. It just didn't work out for them today. I don't know if it was they scheme change. I don't think so. I mean, I doubt they would scheme change against the Dolphins. The Dolphins aren't a team you scheme change against. But that's the situation, or if they have an injury, a couple injuries to the receiving core, if maybe their receivers just weren't playing well. I didn't even highlight any receiver because no one really had a good game, and I didn't highlight any of the running backs because neither of them had a good game either. So his offense was anemic from the get-go, scoring 3 points in the first half. They put themselves in a really bad position for the second half, being down 3 scores. So it's not normal to see Nick Hall like this, and if I'm the Dolphins, I am absolutely ecstatic with the performance of my defense this week. Other guys for the Raiders, outside linebacker Alexander Baumgartner had 3 tackles and a sack. He made some sort of impact, a small impact, but he got to Brian Brown and at least disrupted 1 play. Defensive end Sean Vereen had 5 tackles and tackle for a loss. That's really about it. That's the positives you can take away from this Raiders defense, or those 2 defensive stat lines. Yeah, it just didn't work out for you guys. It happens. The Raiders got fortunate that they share division with the Chargers, who just exist. The Broncos, who lost their quarterback and now seem to be floundering. But they do have the Chiefs, who are up and down with the rookie quarterback. So, a 4-2 start, I think the Raiders are perfectly okay with that record. Maybe not with how their second loss happened. They probably weren't too happy with that. Other guys for the Dolphins, quarterback Brian Brown, I mentioned he had a good game. 26 of 40 for 318 yards, 3 touchdowns. So I did some poor math. His YPA wasn't nearly as efficient as I thought it was. It's only right around 8. But still a good game. 26 of 40. That puts you at what? Oh my god, I gotta do math. 65% completion essentially. So that's always a plus. I think every team will take that. I think I might have done some bad math. Nope, I did good math. It's good. 65%. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think, Brian Brown doesn't throw many interceptions, so when you do, it's a big positive for your defense. So Brian Brown not throwing touchdowns, it's just normal to me now. And I mentioned Marcus Berry having 5 yards a carry. He had 19 carries for 102 yards and a touchdown. I think Caleb Sherman was 4 for 27 for a touchdown. So it just seemed like everything Miami wanted to do on offense was just kind of clicking and working. The Raiders defense, they might have had 1 or 2 minor injuries, but nothing major. But I think the Raiders defense got the word I'm trying to say, phrase I'm trying to say is they got hung up to dry by the Raiders offense. I don't necessarily think that it was the Raiders defense playing badly. They definitely didn't play well, but they didn't play badly. But they were constantly in bad positions or poor field position because of how poorly the offense played this week. And defensively for the Dolphins, cornerback Justin Davis had 2 tackles, a pick, and 2 passes defended. Anytime you can get a turnover off Nick Hall, that's a win for your defense. Especially in a game when you're beating them down by 25. Who knows? Maybe that touchdown makes it 28-17 if it goes the other way. If Justin Davis doesn't pick that ball off, so it makes the game look even wider than it is. Either way, great performance by the Dolphins. We got some bonus content coming later, which I don't want to tease too yet or too early. But we'll talk a little more in depth with someone else about this game. So great win for the Dolphins. 5-0, second best record in the league. Number 2 seed in the AFC. I think they have a matchup with the Steelers later in the season. I gotta imagine that will be the premier matchup of the season. So we'll move on to injuries. Thankfully, I think the number of injuries that we need to talk about on a week-to-week basis is going down. So we get started here. Denver's outside linebacker Joel Palmer, who's still in the league, has a moderate toe sprain. He's out for 1 week, eligible to return in week 8. He is being replaced in the meantime by inside linebacker Reese Westbrook, who is a fifth-year will linebacker out of Alabama, 82 overall. And Reese will be playing at left outside linebacker. So I think it's 1 week. The other actual true linebackers, outside linebackers on your team really aren't good. So I really don't see the harm in trying to Reese out here. The Jets losing, I think, their third tight end this season to a season-ending injury. It's ridiculous. Matt Stone has a severe Achilles rupture. He's gone. The Jets today traded for second-year tight end Jason Dupree out of West Virginia, who's 78 overall. I gotta imagine he'll be getting the start. In an offense that's already kind of had some struggles, it's gonna get some more struggles. So good luck, Jets. New England strong safety Mohamed Latham has a severe ACL rupture. He's gone for the year. I believe he was playing in the nickel spot, not actually playing strong safety. So I think he's going to be replaced by strong safety Jaden Salter, who's a third-year player out of Memphis, who's a 77 overall. So I don't see that being a huge downgrade or a knock on the defense, really. The Colts center Tim Thomas has a moderate wrist sprain. He's out for a week, been replaced by Silo Safara. He's a third-year player out of BYU, 75 overall. Guy we're happy with. He started a few games for us last season, and our offensive line performance stayed the same. So I think we'll be fine with him for a couple weeks if we need to. Cincinnati's outside linebacker Jermaine Dixon, who was also still in the league, I don't know if you guys knew that, has a moderate hamstring tendonitis. He is gone for 2 weeks, coming back week 9 most likely, being replaced by, oh boy, outside linebacker Charlie Graham, who was a 7th-year player out of UCLA, 75 overall, playing to the right side of that defense. I don't think that's a huge downgrade, but I would definitely rather have Jermaine Dixon than Charlie Graham. Oh, Atlanta. Running back Akili Wallace. Severe hamstring pull, gone for 3 weeks, been replaced by Bradley Cooley, 5th-year player out of TCU, who's been splitting reps with him so far this season and having an okay season as a number 2 back. This is going to be tough. Atlanta's 3-2-1. It's hard to see him winning more than 1 game while Achilles gone. It really is. His offense flows through Achilles so hard that if he's not there, I just don't see his offense playing well. Also for Atlanta, unfortunately, defensive end Early Davis, mild biceps pull. He's out for a week, coming back in week 8. Being replaced in the meantime by Marcus Terrell, the rookie out of Illinois. Guy I was kind of high on as a mid-round kind of developmental guy, so I'm really excited to see if he has an impact right away. And then probably 1 week he's going to be playing. I would imagine that Early Davis comes back in week 8 for sure. Cleveland has another guard injury, this time to Henry Brown. He has a moderate wrist sprain, only gone for a week, so it's not terrible. Being replaced by Trey Durant, who's a 7th-year player out of Bama, who's a 78 overall, playing at the left guard position. Baltimore, strong safety Adam Newman. This team cannot withstand injuries. They're not very deep, and their defense is their core of their team, so they need their defense to be fully loaded, so this is a tough injury for them to take on. But Newman has a moderate hamstring pull. He's gone for 2 weeks. Be back week 9. Being replaced in the meantime by 2nd-year player Abdul Childs out of Maryland, who's a 77. I don't think Abdul has much playing time so far, so we'll see how he does. I do believe he was kind of a 75 overall 4 out of 4 guy, so those guys always intrigue me in terms of how they play. So I'm really excited to see if he can make an impact, or if at least he's not the worst rated player. That'd be nice. For the Saints, wide receiver Mike Miller has a severe Achilles bruise. He's only gone for a week by my count. But that receiving core is not, outside Mike Miller, it's not good. Being replaced by 3rd-year player out of Notre Dame, Bruce Riley, who's a 75. Bruce Riley is a name I don't believe I've ever heard before. Riley will be playing most likely the number 2 spot with Jamal Brown Sanderson taking over the slot most likely. So this passing game has been electric so far, but it's taking a huge hit right now. The Rams, my boy, tight end Jonathan Greer, moderate foot fracture, gone for 4 weeks. Thankfully for you, he's not your starting tight end; he's your backup. So I don't think it'll be a huge injury for you as long as Jamal Hawkins stays healthy. But Greer won't be back till week 11. He's being replaced in the meantime by Andrew Yearney, a fourth-year player out of Maryland, who's a 74 overall. And as I mentioned, he is the backup tight end. So he probably won't get on the field too terribly much. I got to see this team playing a lot more 5 wides or 4 wides and playing 2 tight end sets, just based on the personnel and the kind of offensive players you have. So those are the injuries. 2 more season enders. Hopefully we don't have any more rest of the year. Those will always suck. So we'll pivot. Usually it's the end of the episode. Usually you get 2 injuries and we're done. But not this week, folks. No. We have exclusive interview with Dolphins GM, owner, and I think head coach. I think he's all 3. Smackums. I'll be posting that in here. Thank you so much, Smackums, for doing that. It turned out really, really well. I'm really happy with it. And thank you for listening. I will have a little outro after the interview.
Okay, and I am here with Coach Smackums of the Miami Dolphins, who have probably the most impressive win on the season, defeating the Las Vegas Raiders 35-10 in Las Vegas. So we'll be doing some questions with him. First of all, thank you, Coach, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to do this.
Okay, so first one is, you shut down Nick Hall. Nick Hall is probably one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He was 13 of 26. What was the key to doing that? How did you guys manage to make him look human?
So we have a lot of great playmakers on defense. Obviously, it starts with Justin Davis. He's really good at shutting down number 1 wide receivers. He did a good job against Triplet. He did a good job against the Houston wide receiver earlier in the year. So he's always there making plays. We've kind of ratcheted up the intensity a little bit as the season gone on, as we've kind of built that chemistry. And I think, with Flowers and Blankenship going around the edge, I think we were able to make him a little uncomfortable. Their lines, it's getting better. Their offensive line is definitely better than it was last year, but it's still, I think, a relative weak point. So I think we got some pressure in his face, really kind of rushed him, and it really shut down their run game. So it was, by the time the run game gets shut down, you can really tee off and go at him. And our corners are good at playing man coverage and shutting people down. So really played aggressively there.
Yeah, I think it's one of the few games Nick Hall has looked bad, like not just mediocre, but just absolute bad in. So that's absolutely great job of your defense there. Now, moving to your offense, you guys were hyper efficient. I mean, Brian Brown was 26 of 40. Marcus Berry had over 5 yards to carry. Vegas has some players in that defense. How did you attack them so well and so efficiently?
It's really interesting. I felt like coming into this game, our offense had really kind of struggled all season, which I know maybe if you look at the stats, it doesn't look that way. But, Brown had a bad game against Chicago, and we only scored 17, I think, against Houston. And outside of that Detroit game where we made a comeback, our offense is kind of stalled. We've played Las Vegas a lot, and they've always been really good about shutting down Marcus Berry. Marcus Berry's never had a good game against Las Vegas. So I wanted to kind of shift the focus to passing a little more. And so I don't know if, I haven't changed the secondary scheme in a really long time. So this was a pretty dramatic shift from the pistol secondary to vertical. So I don't know if part of it was maybe Vegas wasn't really expecting that because I'm pretty plain vanilla. But I thought, in our past matchups, Barry just never gets going. He always has his worst games against Vegas. So I wanted to try something different, try to let Brown attack their secondary. I know it's one of their strengths, but I thought, maybe we can catch them off guard a little bit in the beginning. They're expecting more runs, and we can get after them with the pass. And I think it worked out pretty good. Got Gibson and Marion Reeder involved. So
even Caleb Sherwin had 6 yards to carry.
yeah.
So I mean, everyone had a good game for you guys. It seemed.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys were able to take revenge for your loss in the AFC Championship game last season. Does it feel good now to do that, or would you rather have that win back than last season?
I mean, obviously, I think we'd rather have had the AFC Championship game when they had an amazing performance in that game, especially their punt returner. I think they had this backup punt returner who gashed our special teams. But I mean, it always feels good to get a win against a coach like Alien and a team like the Raiders, especially if you can come out and get a win like that. I mean, I think we're feeling pretty good at this point in the season.
Okay, so we already mentioned Marion Reeder. I don't know if he's your third or fourth guy on your receiver chart there, but J.C. Weldon was kind of held in check, held to 54 yards, but Reeder had 112 yards and a touchdown. Kind of how big was he for you this week, or important to your offense success?
Yeah, so that's the best performance that Reeder's had as a Dolphin. He's had a couple of other pretty good games, but that was, I think, his first game over 100 yards. He plays in the slot, and what's really interesting is last year when we played the Raiders in the regular season, obvious dirty play by the Raiders, but they hit Reeder and he got a severe concussion, so he was out for 2 or 3 games after that game. So I think he had a little bit of a bone to pick with the Raiders, and he came into this game really hyper-focused and wanted to kind of prove a point. So we're obviously pretty happy with the way he's played the past couple of games. We had kind of kept him inactive the first couple of weeks as he was coming back. He tore his ACL last year after the severe concussion, and I kind of was hoping that maybe if I let him practice for a couple of weeks that maybe his fitness would get a little better. So he didn't actually start playing in the games until I think the third or fourth week. So he came out this week and really played well, and we, obviously need all the help we can get. So it was good. He proved his point, showed the Raiders that he might be able to lay some dirty hits, but we're going to win it out in the end, I guess.
Okay, so now you're looking forward a little bit. You're now 5-0, got the second best record in the league behind the 6-0 Steelers. So home field advantage in the playoffs is a huge bonus for teams that play well. So how much focus are you putting on trying to maybe stay pace and keep up with the Steelers to challenge them for that number one home field advantage slot?
I mean, ideally, we want to keep trying to win games, and depending on how the season plays out, if the Steelers keep up a torrid pace and we're kind of locked in, but home field advantage would be really advantageous for us because I don't know if you've been to Pittsburgh in the winter, but it's not very much fun. I'd much rather play in Miami, so we're going to definitely make a go at it, and we're going to keep putting our players out there in the best position to win games, and we actually have a game against Pittsburgh later in the season, so we'll definitely try to win that game. And maybe if we can get that win, it'll give us the advantage, but we're going to try to win them all and see how it goes. Okay.
And with that, we'll sign off. Another big thank you to Coach Smackens for joining us, and congratulations on your win again.
Thanks for having me, and awesome. This podcast is great, so keep it up, and thank you.
Oh, I appreciate that. And we'll go ahead and sign off here.